It's quiet, dark, and damp. A crumbling concrete floor, bunks against the wall. There are exactly 24 paces around the perimeter. In the corner, a wooden ladder with a firmly locked door. There were no windows. She didn't know how much time had passed, nor did she realize whether it was day or night. The sense of time was gone, and so was the fear. She was tired of being afraid, replaced by apathy and humility. Maybe death wasn't such a bad thing. It was hard to breathe, the stuffiness suffocating her. She lay on the hard bunks, covering herself with a piece of torn blanket, and wished it would all be over sooner. The car turned into an industrial zone and slowed down sharply. The long-abandoned metal depot attracted a dubious crowd. Sometimes you could find people addicted to illegal substances, homeless people and local hobos. The foreign car slowed down in front of a dilapidated shed. The driver got out leisurely, took a bag from the trunk, and disappeared into the shed. He was gone for about an hour, after which he returned satisfied, got into his car, and drove away. The man did not notice that he was being watched closely. As soon as the car disappeared, a stubby man with a long unwashed head and a scraggly beard came out of the elderberry bushes. He went into the barn. He was curious about what the glossy man was hiding, and in general what he was doing here. But to the bum's disappointment, there was nothing in the shed, only garbage and a door leading to the cellar. The homeless man pushed the door, it was locked, and he lost all interest in the shed. But next time he decided to see what the bum was doing in the basement. The man opened the inconspicuous door to the basement and stood on the steps while his eyes adjusted to the darkness. In the corner, on the dirty bunks, curled up a frightened girl.
"Hello?"
said the man calmly as he descended. "Yulia, let me go. I won't tell anyone. I want to go home."
"I understand, but your home is here now."
An hour later, he left the cellar, carefully locked the door, and left. The captive lay on the bunk without moving. The girl's head was noisy. She could not concentrate on any thought. Her head was dizzy and aching. Getting up from the bunk, she somehow made her way to the water canister. A bag of bread was lying next to it, and she greedily gorged herself on it, ignoring the pain in her whole body. She needed her strength. "Yulia! My name is Yulia, and I am a human being. I am a human being, and no one has the right to dispose of me." Yulia sobbed, but she could not stand it and burst into tears. She gave herself her word not to cry. It takes a lot of strength and energy, and she was almost out of it. Yulia remembered the day when she came here. Dr. Vitaly Sergeyevich was recommended to her at work. They said he was a competent specialist, not a doctor. She had a health problem that could only be solved by surgery. She came to the appointment, took the necessary tests. A week later she came for a referral, but the doctor was not there. Yulia decided to wait for him in the hospital park. That's where they met.
"Oh, Yulia, I was just on my way to the ward. Would you like to come with me? Or will you wait here? I've got everything ready. I'll get some documents and then I'll go. It's my day off today. I'm switching with a colleague. Didn't they tell you?"
Yulia agreed to wait. The doctor brought her a referral and offered her a ride because he lives in her neighborhood. That's what he said, and she believed him. The last thing Yulia remembered was the wing of a white bird that obscured the sky. She took a deep breath and woke up already in the dark. Simple and effective. When she woke up, there was someone lying against the wall. She struggled to crawl off the bunk and crawled on all fours to the body. It was a girl with dirty hair. Dead. That the girl was dead. Julia realized at once, even though she was not a doctor. The girl's cold, clammy skin and sweet odor spoke volumes. "Yulia, what do you want me for? Let me go. They'll be looking for me," Yulia shouted, hoping that someone would hear her. But her shouting only made him angry. When he came back after the kidnapping,
"There's not a soul for tens of kilometers. You're underground, so cut the comedy and get over it. You're not getting out of here. If you behave well, you'll live longer. In the meantime, I'll teach you a lesson."
What followed these words, Yulia will never forget. After he left, she couldn't even move for a long time. Now she wanted it to be over quickly. To her horror, this was only the beginning. An elderly, stout man entered the police building. He had come to file a missing persons report on his granddaughter. The man was worried sick.
"When did you say she went missing?"
"I was out of town for almost 2 weeks. No communication there. Last night I came back. Granddaughter is gone,"
said the old man.
"Well, she was young. She went on a bender."
"She's been gone 2 weeks. There's a layer of dust at home. The food is rotten. The flowers are wilted. Her granddaughter hasn't shown up for work in 2 weeks. And she was supposed to have a scheduled surgery, but Yulia didn't show up. My name is Platon Mikhailovich.
Viktor Semyonovich.
Find my granddaughter.
I'll try to do everything possible.
Platon Mikhailovich returned home. In the hallway sat a large cat in grey stripes and an owl. The cat and the owl stared at the owner as soon as he entered the apartment.
They'll be lucky, but so will I.
The old man went into the dark room and closed the door tightly. The apartment was 4-roomed, with high ceilings and huge windows. Platon had moved into this apartment with his mother, so he was the caretaker of the house. His only daughter was born to him during the marriage. Lara, Platon's daughter, was a beautiful and homely girl, but to her misfortune she met Sergei, a handsome neighbor. Married, Julia became the fruit of love and shame. Unable to overcome the difficulties, Larissa committed suicide, leaving the child to her parents. The girl's father quickly moved out, selling the apartment, and no longer appeared in the life of his daughter. Well, Platon and his wife brought up the girl. Yulia was 5 when her grandmother died, so she and her grandfather were left alone. Platon had no heart for Yulia. She was his sunshine and peace. Yulia adored her grandfather and supported and helped him in everything. "Yulia, Grandpa, and these grains?" asked little Julia, pouring out black grains on the palm of her hand.
These in a mortar, gently mortar the ceilings, and here you are, then strain the decoction carefully.
Gave instructions to little Yulia's grandfather. Plato was a clairvoyant, or more simply, a sorcerer. He saw things that ordinary people can't see. He was sometimes called X-ray for seeing illnesses, spoils, closed locks, heavy jinxes. For the most part, Plato did not harm people, tried to help, but he could destroy a person if that person threatened his family. In addition to spoilage and other things, the old man was well versed in herbs and mushrooms, was able to prepare a potion that will put one on his feet and another in the grave. The difference is only one ingredient. And Plato also knew some recipes for poisons, which no expert will not recognize. Therefore, when his granddaughter disappeared, he of course wrote a statement as it should be, but the police did not count on much. The old man searched in his own way. The overhead light is extinguished, only candles are burning. The old man sits at a table in front of a card layout. What he sees puzzles and frightens him.
You see, Fedor Yulia is alive, only she's in a dark place, in the cemetery. It looks like a cemetery, but not a big one. It's a deserted place.
A cat named Fedor sat on the edge of the table and looked at the maps too. Sofa suddenly oohed and ahed.
You're right, it's all very strange.
3 more days passed and there was no news from the police. Platon realized that the police were unlikely to find his granddaughter.
Viktor Semyonovich, the investigator who was in charge of the case of Yulia's disappearance, stood on the threshold of Platon Mikhailovich's apartment.
The old man looked glumly at the man.
Any news?
In a way.
The men sat down at the table in the kitchen and Platon brewed fresh herbal tea.
This collection is good for toning up and clearing the mind.
Smiled Platon.
That's what I need.
The investigator just got sick when he put together a terrible puzzle. In their region for more than 20 years is a maniac, a manhunter, a beast. With these thoughts and facts, Victor went to his superiors. And in the evening he went to Platon, the grandfather of the last missing woman. When he received a missing persons report and the search began, he noticed something familiar in the circumstances of the disappearance. A hospital. 3 girls went missing in his precinct in a year, all looking a bit alike. None of them were found alive. Victor pulled up all the cases for the last 25 years in their region with similar data. Thankfully, this is the 21st century, and now, with the help of a computer, the search takes little time. The machine identified 32 similar cases. 2 were dismissed at once because they didn't fit the age. The rest fit all the parameters. None were found alive and only 4 were identified.
Yeah, I saw it too. It's a man, he's wearing something white, and my granddaughter is still alive. She's in a dark place and there are graves under her feet.
The old man spoke calmly. Victor felt creepy.
Do you know something?
Do you know who I am?
"Well, you?" began the investigator and faltered. The old man was not there. He was alone in the room. Victor looked around confused.
Why are you frozen?
Platon's voice sounded behind his back. Victor almost jumped because there was a window behind him.
You. Do not be afraid, I cannot such things.
With these words, he looked at the stove, and before the eyes of the dazed investigator, the burner levers turned. There was a click, and a blue flame burst out.
Holy shit!
That's the one, the tricks, but I'll get my girl back and you'll help me.
They talked for a long time and discussed a plan of action. The old man stayed to prepare for the ritual, and Victor went to work to clarify something. Yulia huddled in a corner, her strength left neither moral nor physical. The good doctor had broken her. She only felt sorry for her grandfather, who would be left alone. She knew that soon her tormentor would reappear. She had sensed his appearance long before. She heard the sound of the door opening. The torturer had returned. Suddenly, the basement was even colder. The air thickened and there was a slight glow. Small sparks lit up and went out. The torturer froze on the top steps in surprise.
What the?
He began and quickly went down to the prisoner. Yulia had already come to her senses and realized what was happening. Grandfather had found her. Meanwhile, the ground in the cellar was moving, as if someone was trying to get out from under the ground. Yulia huddled even deeper into a corner. She was groggy with fear. The maniac who was her attending physician, Vitaly, stared dumbfoundedly at the basement floor, forgetting about Yulia.
No, I killed you. You're dead.
In the middle of the basement, a girl hovered a few centimeters off the floor. The dead girl stared at her killer with dead eyes, half-decomposed skin hanging in chunks and bones showing on her face. The thick, heavy odor of decomposition came with it. Vitaly goggled at the dead woman as another. A third suddenly appeared beside her. They were approaching the doctor, holding out their hands. The murderer squealed and rushed to run for the stairs. He jumped out of the basement and ran into a homeless man who was sitting under the door. As if the homeless man sensed the danger coming from the man, he grabbed a piece of pipe and swung it at the doctor. The killer, not expecting the attack, fell to the floor, losing consciousness. The homeless man quietly started to go down into the basement, thinking that the man was hiding something valuable there. At first, he didn't see anything. It was quiet and smelled foul. He was about to leave when he heard a low moan.
Mother of God.
Exclaimed the man and crossed himself.
Are you alive?
Help!
Now, be patient, girl.
And an hour later, the territory of the former metal depot was cordoned off. Police and experts were scurrying around. An ambulance had just taken the victim away. Almost the end of a gruesome story. He kept them there. Yulia wasn't the first victim. There are 3 found in the basement and near the barn. Obviously, this man has been doing this for years. Before, I never believed in mysticism. All these sorcerers and psychics considered charlatans and swindlers. And here it is.
How is the girl?
Of course, there are a lot of health problems. She has already been moved from the intensive care unit to a ward, and guards have been posted just in case. The girl remembers everything, although at times her story looks like nonsense. And the homeless man, of course, well done, not lost.
You helped this homeless guy. What's his name, Kostya? Yes, Konstantin Mikhailov, a former university teacher. His story is simple and banal. He got in touch with the wrong people and ended up on the street. We'll help.
Promise the investigator.
What should I write in my report? I can't just write it as it is. You write 2 reports. In one, you'll write how it really was, and in the other, you'll write it in a cultured and proper manner. Got it. Go to work.
Meanwhile, Yulia finally came to her senses and found her grandfather by the bed. He sat with closed eyes and mumbled something. On the nightstand on a row stood vials of medicinal potions. Grandfather remained true to himself, and though he believed in evidence-based medicine, he willingly used unconventional medicine. And ancient magic in general works wonders. After a few days, the girl was much better, and she persuaded the doctor to discharge her. At home and the walls heal, especially their grandfather. Soon they were visited by an investigator together with a homeless man named Kostya. Yulia and her grandfather were grateful to Kostya for his help in saving the girl, and frankly speaking, if not for him, it is unlikely she would have survived. The grandfather offered Kostya to stay with them in the summer house at the dacha. In fact, the house was not a summer house. There was hot water with heating and a kitchen. Of course, Konstantin agreed, began to help with the household and vegetable garden. From the police, Yulia learned a lot of new details in the case. Vitaly Mishin, a respected doctor and doctor of sciences, a respectable man with a strong family and children, and a brutal maniac who has been killing girls for 20 years. The same person, surprisingly. But for so many years, he never once came to the attention of law enforcement. He was not associated with any of the crimes, and most likely, if it were not for a coincidence of strange circumstances, this case was put in the archives. Many acquaintances of the Mishin family for a long time considered a conspiracy and falsification of facts, did not believe in the guilt of Vitaly. But the wife as quickly believed and filed for divorce. Perhaps she knew or suspected something. She did not wait for the court, and as soon as they were divorced, changed her name and with children went to the other end of the country. It was simply dangerous for Mishin's wife and children to stay in the region. And then Vitaly began to give confessions that made the hairs of experienced operatives stand on end. He had already realized that he was facing a life sentence, and he had been declared sane, so he had nothing to lose.
This is my moment of glory. It's a pity I didn't finish in time, as I sensed that this doll should be finished and that she was causing trouble. I didn't have time. Who attacked me?
The homeless guy was following you. He didn't like you.
Bastard!
Vitaly grew up in an ordinary family of an engineer and a doctor, or rather the head doctor of the city hospital. As a kid, he had friends, played soccer. He had a dog, and he was very worried when the dog was hit by a car. Outwardly handsome, he was attracted to women from a young age. The future maniac brilliantly graduated from medical school, then residency, and a warm place at his mother's side. Years went by, Vitaly married, the young bought an apartment. Live happily ever after. A good job, a place to live, a family. The beast was asleep until he met a young and attractive student. A girl named Svetlana was studying to be a nurse and had an internship in his department. Sveta attracted his attention and he wanted to possess her so that the girl belonged to him entirely. Thoughts wandered in the doctor's head until they formed into something creepy. At that time, he was an ordinary surgeon after all. His mother had a conscience. Sveta was not a local, lived in a dormitory, but on weekends she tried to go home to the village. The bus to the village ran regularly, but it broke down with the same regularity. Vitaly offered Sveta a ride to the village, saying he was going there to his mother-in-law. The girl saw nothing suspicious in the offer and agreed. That was her first mistake, and the second was that she didn't tell anyone that Vitaly would give her a ride. To be more precise, she told her friend, the same intern. Svetlana never saw her parents again, and her new home was the basement of an abandoned house. Her body was found 2 years later and could not be identified for a long time. For Vitaly, Svetlana was like a first love. He remembered all the smallest details and willingly then shared them with the operatives. This was the beginning of a series of murders of girls. Then the doctor bought an abandoned metal depot through front men. A good doctor, a great family man, and a beast. It was hard to tie it all together and gather evidence. Yulia opened a small store with esoteric literature, herbs and candles. Her grandfather slowly passed on his skills to his granddaughter, and she had a gift of her own. Kostya continued to help around the house and in the store. He was helped to restore his documents and to sue the swindlers. It is too early to say how the case will end, but there is always a chance. But Vitaly unfortunately did not receive the punishment he deserved. He was sentenced to life imprisonment and he went on parole to Mordovia. On the way, there was an accident. Vitaly's heart got bad and he died. The official cause was cardiac arrest. Victor is sure that Platon was not without Platon, but the investigator was only glad one less monster. Almost everyone found in the basement and on the grounds has been identified. Some of the places were indicated by the maniac himself. Finally, the families of the victims were able to learn the truth and bury their loved ones. Unfortunately, there are too many monsters walking free in our world.